if she's coming from this henotheistic background, she might be taking the gods because she's pissed at her father for treating her husband that way, or because this is her heritage
Mm-hmm.
and she's not entirely sure she's ready to give up.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Eating the Apple. I'm Jeff,
I'm Chris.
and we're going to continue today with with Genesis chapter 28. We left off last time with Jacob stealing Esau's birthright and being cast out by his mother as his bent on murderous revenge brother swore to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
So now Jacob's on the run, and he
Well, not quite. Right at the beginning of this chapter, Isaac called for Jacob to come back. He's not dead yet, and he blessed him again, which I think is funny because he already told Esau, I just gave Jacob my blessing. I don't have any more blessings for you. Then he comes around and he blesses him again. He says, "Go to don't marry a Canaanite woman. Go to the Padan Aram, however you pronounce that, to the house of your mother's father, and find a wife there." And he blessed him. May he give you and your descendants the blessing given to Abraham. So it's another blessing that he didn't have before.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And it's also interesting how he brings up his father. Like it all has to, he wants to remind the reader in the story, the son, that this is all part of a through line. Like, don't forget that you're asking for Abraham's blessing.
Mm-hmm.
It's important. They'll know what that means. Okay, yeah. So he sets out. He's reminded to not marry a Canaanite woman, and so yeah, like you said. So he left Beersheba, and
Mm-hmm.
he sets off, and on his journey gets tired, finds a nice soft rock to lay his head on, and goes to sleep. And then when he's asleep, God visits him. What's interesting about this time whenever God visits him?
Well, I don't mean to lengthen these episodes, but I did want to go back because there's another thing that was inserted that, again, it doesn't seem to be necessary, and I don't know why it's there. Esau found out that Isaac had blessed Jacob again and said, "Don't marry a Canaanite woman." And so, just to spite his father, he goes out and uh, let's see, I can't tell if it's two women. It says he went to Ishmael and married Methala, the sister of both and daughter. Okay, so I guess it's just one way. He married a Canaanite woman to spite his father. And again, I don't get it why it was inserted.
Where are we? What?
That's verse 6, 28:6.
Okay, let's see. Yeah, and then Jacob had obeyed his father. I'm missing where Esau learned that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him to Padan Aram, assuming we're still talking about Jacob, to take a wife from there.
Right.
And that when he blessed him, okay, so I see. Esau then realized that displeasing Canaanite women. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, this is another traditional marriage again. In addition to the wives he already had, he's gotten another wife. So we're still one man, one woman.
Okay, how interesting. Okay, yeah, like he's just like burning it all down.
Yeah,
like you want to give me a blessing. In fact, you want to give me some like half-assed, like non-blessing,
almost
basically.
a curse.
Yeah, exactly. My blessing is to be the servant of my brother. Like, you could have kept that, dude.
Yeah. So, anyways, Jacob has another vision of God. This time he's asleep, specifically with a rock under his head. I don't understand the significance of that, but God doesn't say, don't be afraid this time. I don't know if it's because he spoke to him before directly, or if it's because it's in a dream, but it doesn't happen.
That's interesting. I'm glad you called that out. I'm not sure.
Also, one of and this is going to be, again, spoilers for Exodus coming up. It specifically says in this prophetic dream that he has, God says, "I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you," which is, although, let's see, specifically, he's just talking about multiplying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you'll spread out to the east and west, north, south. All peoples will be blessed through you and your offspring. I'm with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I'll bring you back to this land. I'm not going to leave you until I've done what I promised you. So that is going to come into play later, for sure.
Yeah, and I think the reason why we have the stone is because it was upon the stone that Jacob laid his head, and therefore that is the stone with which Jacob will make the pillar and set a reminder of that covenant or that promise.
I mean, I guess, but I don't see the point. He set it up as a pillar and anointed it with oil. which, I mean, great, this is significant to you, but what's the significance to us? I don't think it's ever mentioned again, you know?
You mean that specific stone, or the fact that
Yeah.
stones are used?
Well, both. Like the anointing with oil, yes, but like specifically this stone, I don't think it's ever mentioned again, and so I don't get the point.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
understand why he would revere it and anoint it with oil, but why do we need to know?
Well, maybe because of the fact that, and maybe it's not so much the stone as it is that he calls the place Bethel. It could be that,
Yeah, I guess they're just trying to set up a reason for the place. And
Yeah.
again, we talked about before Bethel. This is El, not necessarily Yahweh. There's talk. I've heard a lot of people say that they're really the same thing, and he just didn't reveal his true name to them yet. But I don't buy that. That book that I read, the Exodus book by Friedman, specifically goes through and talks about how they were meshed together. Again, well, we'll get into this later, but the Levites were not part of Israel, and then they joined Israel, and that's part of what Levite means. Levi, they were added in after the fact, and they were worshippers of Yahweh, and supposedly Jacob was, his god was El, and they
Yeah.
became fused later. So
Yep. Yep. So I've read. Um, and so it could just be more retconning. Like these are places that are significant to the primary audience for these texts, and so we have to kind of have a reason for these places to be, right. And that's why they specifically say that it's called Bethel and it used to be called Luz, right.
really,
Like, you remember that town Luz? Well, the one that's now called Bethel. This is why. This is where that came from. It's because of this tree.
yeah,
Right? I mean, so like, but yeah, why these types of things have existed or have persisted through
mm-hmm.
through various versions and translations of the text? I don't know. That's very, but like I said, there it is. But nonetheless, God did visit Jacob and didn't tell him to not be scared. I guess at this point, if Jacob's gonna be scared of anything, it's gonna be his brother. He doesn't need to be scared of God if Esau's after him. That dude's a heck of a hunter.
Yeah,
Let's see, and then oh, this is where we set up the fact that,
the kickback scheme.
yep, the tithing, the tenth,
Mm-hmm.
everything that you give me, I'll give back a tenth. Yeah, and so the tithing is important there. Does tithe have a tenth etymology?
Yes, because it specifically says here, all that you give me, I will give you a tenth. That's where
Yeah.
it comes from.
Well, I just wonder if the word tithe has like a root meaning tenth. It sounds very similar. So
I
makes
don't
sense.
know. It sounded to me like it was just a word created to give description of this, but maybe I'm wrong.
Okay.
I don't know.
All right.
All I know is that if the mayor in my town did this, I would call it a kickback scheme, and it would be corrupt.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I don't know what do you give back to God? How do you give God a tenth? What
you
does he want?
sacrifice it.
So you just have to get rid of it.
Yeah, it's not, you want to make it so that you nor anybody else can make use of it. God has given me so much that I have more than I need. I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to give it back to him.
Why wouldn't God want people who don't have enough to receive that?
Well, he's giving them so much. He's so generous that this is, he's given me so much more than I actually need. I'm gonna give it back.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot. There's they have 10% too much.
Mm-hmm.
So why wouldn't God want you to be instead of destroying it, throwing it off a cliff or burning it, to give it to someone who doesn't have enough? There are lands that are undergoing massive, devastating, what's the word?
Famine.
Famines. And you have more than what you need. Can you just
Mm-hmm.
like put that on a camel, slap the camel on the butt and say head that way and like give this stuff to somebody? God's like, just
I mean,
set it on
these
fire.
people are not isolated. They would have had to have had interactions with others.
Yeah, traders. Yeah.
Yeah, and
I
if you
mean,
kept that 10%, every time you harvest, you get an extra 10%. If you kept that, then maybe you could weather the famine in the future.
well, let's assume that you're not allowed to do that. And later Joseph will be allowed to.
Yeah.
He's actually pretty smart. He keeps up. I think he keeps a seventh. We'll get into the math, but
No,
that
I think it's
math.
a fifth.
Oh, it's a fifth. See, there you go.
20%.
Yeah, 20%. But it's like,
No,
is it only five?
It's
I
a
think
fifth, so it's
I think
20%.
you're right.
You're right.
Yeah.
I'm
So
right.
somehow, if you produce double now, but you only keep a fifth of it, you have enough to sustain the second half. Like, that doesn't make sense. That math doesn't work. You have to keep half in order to be able to sustain the second half. Anyway,
And we'll get into that in the future. It's a big deal.
yeah. So, but anyway, let's say that this whole tithing system is set up so that you don't profit. Like God doesn't want you to profit from the extra that you have. Okay, fine, donate it, give it away. That's what church. That's what tithing is meant to represent now, right? Is like a
Mhm.
donation to the church to like furthering their practices, things like that, or just giving charitable donations, giving things away to the less fortunate. Granted, tax laws aside, you're not supposed to profit from those things. So you're not profiting if you're giving it away. So why not just like I said, just give that tenth away?
Well, I mean, eventually it's going to be used. It's going to be abused for sure. There are many,
Mm-hmm.
many rich, rich, rich churches out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So one in particular.
Okay, so moving on to 29, Jacob goes to this is where Jacob is going to meet and marry
Hmm.
Leah and Rachel.
Okay.
So if I'm not mistaken, Leah has what do they say, weak eyesight, and Rachel has a really good body. If I'm not mistaken, right? That's how they.
I don't remember what they said about Leah, but yes, Rebecca is definitely the hot one. They're sisters. Rachel's the
Yeah,
younger sister.
right. Yeah, and see, there you go. Okay, so yeah, they they meet Jacob on his travels as he comes up to put on Aram, and they say, "Do you know?" He asks him, "Do you know Nahor's grandson Laban?" And they said, "Oh yeah, we know him. He's actually doing pretty well. In fact, there he is. There's
Hmm.
him and his daughter Rachel with some sheep, and so there's Jacob's indication that these are the shepherd folks that are descendant from the people of Abraham, his grandfather, right? So I mean, you have to keep God. I can't tell you how. No, never mind. I'm not going to get into that. They keep marrying into the same line. Like that's not okay. Like you shouldn't do that. But anyway, yeah. So let's see. Laban hurries to meet him. He's like, "Holy
Hmm.
cow! Like you are my flesh and blood. You're my grandnephew or whatever it is, however that works. Or you're my nephew." And Laban says, just because we're related doesn't mean that you should be working for free. What do you want? And he said, Jacob doesn't answer. First, they let us know that Laban has two daughters. Why is that significant?
Hmm.
I don't know. Maybe we'll find out. Leah was older and Rachel was younger. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel had a lovely figure.
Hmm.
Like,
Anne was beautiful.
yeah, she had a lovely figure and was beautiful. So she
She
was
had the
like,
face to match.
yeah, she had 36, 24, 36. Leah, what can we say nice about Leah? She couldn't see very well. And and it says Jacob was in love with Rachel and said, "I'll work for 7 years if you let me have your younger daughter Rachel." And Laban's like, "Sure, you're my direct line, but sure, better you than somebody else." I
Right.
guess that
But
makes sense.
and also like I get the point of selling your daughter. That's the thing, that happens, whatever. But Jacob's been blessed like a lot. He's the chosen line of God, and he's blessed in everything that they do and all this stuff. They're not poor. Why can't he
Hmm.
just buy her? Why does he have to work instead of handing over a sheep or whatever?
Interesting, interesting. That didn't even occur to me. Why? How are you even in this mindset? Of course you can buy this woman. That's so funny. Yeah,
I
you're right. He does. He
did.
does.
I have objections to this stuff, and the objections stick out to me. Like I feel the same way with you. You remember details that I completely forget or miss, like the fact that Leah had weak eyes.
Yeah,
Does that mean she couldn't see well, or was that she was ugly? I don't know what the intent is, but I've forgotten about that. I forgot about the Dan thing. Like you
yeah.
remember all these details that I forget, but man,
It's
these
just
things
it's funny to
just
me. These are funny.
stick in my craw, and it stands out. And then I see another thing, I'm like, oh yes, I'm reminded of that.
Yeah.
It,
So interestingly, like you said, I never thought of that, but Jacob, a man of means, nonetheless decides that he wants to labor, physically labor. Again, a
mhm.
trait in Jacob that we've never known him to possess. He's kind of been a tent body, so to speak, a mama's boy. Everything that he has been gained through deception. And so now he's like, you know what? It's time for me to earn my keep, honestly. He's like, so I'll work for you for 7 years. Is that right? Did he bring it?
Mhm.
Is he the one that said that, or was it Laban?
Yes,
Um,
he said, I'll work for you for 7 years in return for your younger daughter, Rachel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there you go. And so Laban, he's like, yeah, he cottons to that, no problem. And he works for him for 7 years. And so then Jacob says to Laban, "Give me my wife. My time is completed, and I want to make love to her."
Well, he loved her so much that he worked the 7 years, but they seemed like days to him.
Yeah, that's true. I'm not gonna lie, I like that. That's cute. That's nice that they
I mean, yeah,
put that
I
in there.
have a very, very strong, loving relationship with my wife, and
Mm-hmm.
we're rock solid. I totally get that sentiment.
Mm-hmm. I also wonder if the reason why he specifically mentions that he wants to make love to her is because he's like, look, dude, I've been working my tail off for 7 years. I need some help here. You know, he's like,
Yeah.
give me your daughter. And so Laban's like, sure, I'll give you my daughter. And
More deception.
yep, when the morning came, let's see, he woke up next to Leah, right? He didn't realize what was happening. I guess during the meal, like I guess Jacob got a little out of it. Woke up next
So
to Leah.
I want to point out the Catholic version that I'm reading along with this has a footnote that says the bride was veiled throughout the entire wedding ceremony, which ended only in the darkness of night, thus the possibility of deception. In this case, again, the substitution was of one person for another is not to be judged by our standards, especially since the intentional presence of many people must have compelled Jacob to accept what had been done. Polygamy was not a difficulty for him since he was following the practice of nomads, whereas Abraham had been monogamous in according with the spirit of his native Babylonian environment. And I'm sitting here going, what are you smoking? This was a monogamous relationship?
Monogamous in the spirit of his nomadic environment. So
No.
did they not just qualify that though, and say that he was monogamous in some certain way?
It says polygamy was not a difficulty for him, Jacob, since he was following the practice of nomads, whereas Abraham had been monogamous in accord with the spirit of his native Babylonian environment. So it's saying that he was from Babylon. These are their practices. He's now in Canaan, and he's holding true to these values that he had. But no matter how you look at it, it was not a monogamous relationship.
Remind me, do you remember how Hagar came up, like their relationship came about, Abraham and Hagar's?
Yeah, because his wife couldn't conceive, so she's like, here, take my slave.
But Abraham was in on that. He knew what was happening.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't consider that monogamy unless again, by definition, it's still monogamy regardless of like who you're vetting.
Mean, so you could say that, but then you can't, after saying that, turn around and say that this is what the Bible wants for us in marriage. It's one man, one woman. That's monogamy. Okay. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah, I know what you mean. Huh. Interesting. I wonder how we're going to square that later. There has to be some way to square that, because in lieu of that, we're just left with the Wild West when it comes to, you know, what are we supposed to do? What's the definition of marriage? What's the definition of monogamy? So strange. And that's some very good insight in that text you just read. Okay, so yeah, he wakes up and there's Leah, and he wants to know. He's like, didn't I serve you for Rachel? I thought I made that clear. And Laban said, yes, actually, but we don't really conform to the whole second daughter before first daughter type of thing. If you want the second daughter, you're going to have to take the one with the weak eyes. And
then you're gonna have to work for me another 7 years.
Yep. So he's like, sure, do it. Do another 7. I mean, it's not something that Jacob necessarily can't do. He's fine with it.
Yeah. Apparently, though, he worked for another 7 years, but he was allowed to take Rachel before that. So he worked for 7 years. He got Leah, and he was pissed off. And they're like, okay, we'll go ahead and take Rachel, but 7 more years I need.
Finish my daughter's bridal week. I'm not sure what that. I'm assuming that's like a celebratory thing that happens. The bridal week.
Yeah.
Finish Leah's bridal week. She's your wife. But after that, you can bet her sister, and she's not going to say a word.
I'm assuming it's another cultural ritual, like the mourning, time of mourning, and the burial stuff. Yeah. I have a feeling it's like that.
Okay, yeah. So then he works for Laban. He's Jacob's nothing if not honest and follows through on his word. He goes ahead and he gets Rachel. Yeah. Does what he did. What he came
turned over
to do.
A new leaf.
Yeah, exactly. Works for another 7 years, even after he's already received the benefit of his deception, or of Laban's deception. So the Lord at this point saw that Leah wasn't loved. He didn't realize that at first. The fact that Jacob labored for 7 years to get Rachel, didn't even want to sleep with her in the first place. And despite all that, the Lord was like, oh, so he loves her. He had sex with her, therefore he loves her. Like, no, man, like, obviously not. So he enabled Leah to receive, but not Rachel. And because the Lord had seen her misery, Leah names her first son Reuben, and assumes that this is just like unfortunate, just like a lot of people do nowadays. They assume that that's going to that's going to make their husband love them.
Yeah.
Didn't work. So
It's going to save my marriage.
yeah, exactly. And so because it didn't work, the second son that she bears, Jacob, is named Simeon because
Mm-hmm.
the Lord knows that she's not loved. And the third son that she has by him is named Levi. We just need to know that.
Well,
And
he's all again named Levi because God saw that she's still not loved, and this time it's going to work. Absolutely going to work.
Simeon
But
and Levi, yeah.
this has got to be retconned in, according to the book with Freeman. He said Levi was not one of the original tribes, and that they joined in later. So this couldn't be true if that's the case.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and we're basically established. It seems like we're establishing a segment of the tribes that will become, because like we're just getting this brick of text of like the four children that are born, and then finally they have Judah.
And it makes me wonder if Judah is also retconned in.
That's what I've read.
Because what I wish I'd started taking notes on like videos that I watch and stuff, because I watch a lot of this explanatory stuff about these things, and apparently there was Israel and there was Judah, and Jerusalem was the center of Judah, and it existed long before Israel.
Yeah.
And then when Israel was dispersed and gone to Babylon or whatever, and Judah was left, that's when like a bunch of people moved in. I guess only the elites were taken to Babylon, and all the normal people just kind of shuffled in and became part of Judah. So I'm wondering if it was, again, retconned in. Judah's not really one of the tribes of Israel at first,
right?
But now we're all living together. So yeah, you're in.
Yeah, that's one of the things that Matt Baker says in his Who Wrote the Bible video, I think. He talks about how there were actually, I mean, as far as they can tell, historically 10 tribes of Israel, and the other two, Judah and I forget the other one off the top of my head, and another one, were kind of, like you said, retconned in, made to kind of complete the story, to like give us like a broader picture that explains everything, that all of the stories that you might hear from that era. Right. And so you just kind of like fold them in, make them part of this narrative. And so now we have historical documentation that shows this is where these folks came from. So yeah, and 100% that kind of tracks here. Like you're getting just like, sure, this is where they all came from, because Jacob was deceived. She had 4 kids, and they all were named as such because she wasn't loved. Like it's all basically the same story 4 times over. But Judah's important, though. Judah's important because, if I'm not mistaken, this is the lineage that gives us Jesus, right? Judah,
and David and everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
All the important kings.
Yeah, precisely. So we need you can't skip Judah. You know what I mean? If you're going to create this narrative and it's all going to be like all encompassing, you have to have Judah be part of Jacob's lineage. So that finishes off 29 for us. And so now we're going to start with 30, and that's essentially the rivalry between Leah and Rachel. We're going to kind of get into that. So Rachel is still barren, but she's seen her husband give 4 sons to her older sister. And so she screams at him, "Give me children or I'll die. Like, give me children." Like, you know what I mean? And I'm not sure what else Jacob could do. He's like, "I don't think you realize how this works. Like, I'm doing my part." You know?
Yeah, and he says, "Am I in the place of God who has kept you from having children?"
Exactly. And I was thinking about this last night when he says, "Am I in the place of God who has kept you from having children?" You can read that as him saying life is a miracle and it's only God is the one that grants life. But it also kind of reads to me that he's admitting that all of these things that happen are because of God. What do you think of that? Like, which one do you think that is, if either?
To be honest, if I'm taking this as something that actually happened, it sounds more like he's just frustrated. He's like, "What do you want me to do, woman? I'm having sex with you. It's out of my hands. I'm giving you my seed. It's either you or God that's preventing this."
Interesting.
That's the take that I had when I first read it, at least.
Okay, that's fair. I don't know why that kind of stuck. It stuck with me because there have been things that happen, and there are going to be things that happen that kind of make me wonder. Like, you guys clearly recognize that God is the one behind this. Like, if he says it's going to be done, then it's going to be done. So why is there all this like deception and questioning and things like that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of why it stuck out
Yeah,
to me.
I've seen that a lot. God has proven himself many times over to these people, and yet almost every time they're still like, "What? You seriously? You know, me? This is
Yeah, God's like, yes. What do you want me to do?
yeah."
Yeah. Okay. So she says, "Here's Bilhah, my servant. Sleep with her so you can bear children for me, and I too can
Yep.
build a family through her." And like we've
More
seen
slave
this.
wives.
Yeah, exactly. Jacob has no problem with that. She became pregnant and gave him a son.
And they're at this point fighting over him by having kids. You know, thinking, well, if I have more kids than she does, then I'll be loved. I'll be the one that gets loved.
Yeah.
Can't speak right now, but that's
Well, no, and then again, they've already recognized that that God is the reason why, and God recognizes that Rachel is favored over Leah. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And to the extent that they're not even surprised, the children and Leah is not surprised when Rachel, what happens to Rachel eventually happens. They're not surprised that he mourns her like he does. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like they're like, yeah, I get that. You know, Leah. God, could you imagine being Leah? I mean, I can see why Laban would want to pawn her off on
Yeah.
Jacob, but I mean, he's rich and part of the lineage that you consider to be holy or whatever. So
Yeah, and now you figured out a way to get twice the amount of work out of him.
yeah, there you go. He's still working. The second set of 7 years still ain't it. Yeah. So this is where we get Dan. Dan, product of Bilhah, and it's because God has vindicated me. But again, not really, because it's not your womb. You know.
Well, I
Um,
mean, but there's again, I think it's a cultural thing that you can take someone as your son. You know what I
mhm.
mean? It's
Well,
choosing an heir kind of thing. But
and
again, more to the point though, she conceives again. The servant does conceive a second time, and Rachel says, "I've had a great struggle with my sister, and I have won. So I'm going to
yeah,
name him Naphtali."
yeah,
Like how have you won? You haven't had it. You're fighting over how many kids you can have, and you haven't even had the most. How have
yeah,
you won?
yeah. Um, yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah, and again, the next thing that happens here is Leah's not having any more kids. I guess she's old enough that she's not, or she just assumes God's done with her, so she gives him, another slave wife to
Mhm.
have kids in her name.
Yep. Yeah, that's how we get. Who do we get there? We get Gad and Asher.
Asher, yep.
So far we have 4 kids with Leah. Two. Do we have 2 with Bilhah? Yeah, Naphtali
Yes.
and Dan, and then we have 2 more with Zilpah. So we have Gad and Asher. So we have 8 children, 8 sons. And so okay, and so this is kind of a part that I was kind of confused about when I was reading before. So they're out harvesting their sheaves of wheat. Reuben goes out and finds some mandrakes, and Rachel says to Leah, "Give me some of your son's mandrakes." Right? This is the firstborn.
Please,
Reuben's the
though.
firstborn.
She's
Yeah,
she's being nice about it though. Please
yeah.
give me some
Well,
of your son's mandate.
yeah. This is her blood sister. So, and she's the youngest. So, like, there's going to be
Right.
some measure of respect, even if it's undue because of the
Right.
birth order. Rachel, let's see. It wasn't enough that you took my husband. Now you're going to take my mandrake. So Leah feels like she has some right to Jacob, even though.
Even though it was a marriage of deception. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So and then
And also
Rachel's
it
like,
seems to going back to that polygamy statement from the Catholic notes, if she is, I got him, I'm the one that married him, you stole him from me by marrying him also, it kind of goes against the idea that polygamy was the norm here.
mhm. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because we're just continuing with the same. This is the same order of. This is the same like kind of like cultural milieu that took place generations prior. So yeah, okay. And so then what happens?
So God gives her Leah another son.
That's right. God gives Leah another son. Jacob's fine with the being purchased for mandrakes. He's like, that sounds right. And Leah conceives twice more, really. God rewarded him. So God rewarded
Yeah.
her. So we get Issachar. And then God presents her with a precious gift. So we get Zebulun. So now we're up to 10. We have 10 kids, right? And we have 10 kids before Rachel has even conceived, right?
Right.
And then later we get Dinah. Now, what's interesting at this point, I want us both to try to consider whether or not it mentions he having any more daughters, because it does make reference later in the text to all of his sons and daughters.
Mm-hmm.
But we only hear of Dinah because Dinah is an important part of why Reuben and Simeon don't receive their birthright as firstborn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, but anyway, so God. Oh, then God remembered Rachel.
Yep.
He's got a note. He's got a list. It's like Noah, cross that off. Rachel, oh no.
Well, maybe the list had Rachel up higher, and then when Leah bought Jacob with the, hired him with the mandrakes, with my son's mandrakes, maybe he's like, well, oh, I'll get to you later.
He's like, who's that? Oh no, Rachel. Oh my God, I forgot. Yes. So he remembered Rachel, enabled her, listened to her. Finally, is listening to her, and enabled. So wait. He listens to her. Why wasn't he listening before? I don't understand that.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be something. So we're having fun. We're saying that like he remembered her. There's some other meaning there, because that's not.
Well, and it makes me wonder how much we're missing. How much of the story was there and just didn't get remembered or didn't get written down or was written down and lost,
Yeah, that's so. Yeah, it can't mean what we think it to mean, and there must be something that was excised for brevity or clarity. I don't know.
Or it could have just been an insertion later, and so that's why it jumps. But
true. Yep, could be. Okay, so she became pregnant, and God remembered her disgrace, right? And our God has taken away her disgrace, and so she gets Joseph. And Joseph is important because it's the firstborn son of his preferred wife, right? So let's see, and she has another son later. Who does she have? She'll have Benjamin later, but we haven't gotten to Benjamin yet. No. Okay, so can you kind of go into? Do you mind kind of discussing what happens with Jacob and Laban during his second and third term of labor?
Yeah. So I don't know. I wasn't prepared for that. Give me a second.
Yeah, no problem. I don't mind going into it. I just if you kind of like remember the top level stuff, but I'll go into it a little bit. So, okay. Basically, he's going to continue his laboring under Laban, right?
Right.
And Laban says, so basically what I'm getting at, and the part that I kind of forget is this is the part where Jacob kind of sees a way out. He kind of says, okay, here's the thing. I'm going to don't pay me my wages. Like I told you what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it. And you've given me what you said you're going to give me, despite, a little bit of we'll call it a friendly misunderstanding. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to tend your flocks, and henceforth anything with stripes or polka dots or whatever, right? Spotted.
Well, but before that, they're talking, and Jacob saying, let me take my wives and my things and go back to my homeland. But Laban has noticed the blessings from the Lord, and he doesn't want to give that up. It goes back to the, figuring out a way to get double the dowry, essentially. He says, if I have found favor in your eyes, please stay. I have learned by divination, which, again, that's something that's a big no-no in Christianity. So it's interesting the way it's presented here. It says, I've learned by divination that your Lord has blessed me because of you. Name your wages and I will pay them. He's trying to get him to stay. It's very clear. And he doesn't want to let him go. And things are going to come to a head at some point.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then, but he essentially says, like, I don't want money. I thought at some point, so he says, I'm going to remove every speckled and spotted goat from your flock, right? But henceforth, every speckled and spotted goat given like that result from this non-speckled and spotted flock that are resulting of them, I get to keep those. And this is, of course, Laban. They know how animal husbandry works. He's like, yeah, sure. I mean, what are you going to get? 1 or 2 every few generations, whatever.
Yeah. And on top of that, like, obviously they knew that you can get, if you've got I assume that if you have a population of sheep, some of them are spotted and some of them are not, that sometimes you can have a spotted one give birth to one without spots or whatever. So it seems like it's an ongoing thing. He says, if you come and check my things, any one that has no spots, no blemishes, will be considered yours, and I will be considered a thief for having this. So,
and so
there's that.
The plan he devises is to have branches and what is it? Peeled branches at all the watering troughs, so that they would be directly in front of the flocks when they came to drink. So he peels these branches and puts them in front of the watering troughs, and that way, whenever they drink, they'll like kind of the long thinness of the branch will kind of bestow upon them a spotted nature.
Yeah, I don't know how that's supposed to work.
And that's the part that kind of confused me. And so they drink from. So he would only bring the strong ones to those troughs.
Right. And they would mate in front of the
Hmm.
branches, and that's supposedly how it works. I
Right.
don't get it, but
Yeah. So they would mate in front. Yeah. And continuing on, they would then give birth to spotted and speckled
hmm
offspring, and he'd only engage in that practice with the strong one. So, and as such, Jacob eventually gained flocks and flocks of strong goats, and
right.
Laban was left with all the weak ones.
He's getting them through deception, and he's using magic. Like now, you wouldn't. I don't think a lot of people would consider putting branches in front of a water trough to be magic, but it is a magic kind of thing. It's not, like poof, I have fire in my hand, but it is magic. It's superstitious kind of magic that's being used, and a lot of people do that these days. Various neo-pagan kind of cultures, they do these similar kind of ritual magic things, and you know Christians look down upon that thing, see it as of the devil.
Mm-hmm.
That's directly what's happening here.
And that's what's so confounding about this is there's no explanation of any kind of, I mean, I don't want to use the word science because I don't expect that out of this, but there should at least be some reason. But all we're given is here's this weird superstitious thing that he's engaging in, and it worked.
Yeah, but
And
that's what I'm saying. It's magic. It's not
yeah,
even like it's not explained as being God's doing. It's just
yeah,
magic.
yeah. No, agreed. But what are we supposed to take from that? Are we supposed to say like, surely we can't be expected to believe that magic worked, but it never came to, it was never explained that God said, hey, do this, because
Right.
then fine, we get that a lot. There's a lot of these things. Hey, do this
Mm-hmm.
weird thing because I said so, and then you're going to receive this bounty. It's just Jacob just kind of creates this thing whole cloth, and he's like, I bet if I strip these branches, I'll get striped and spotted goats, and I'll never intermingle them with Laban's weak flock again, and so everything that's born of them will be striped and spotted, and so they'll all be
Mm-hmm.
mine.
Well, and if
Okay.
God is behind it, if it's not just this magic that he's doing, if God is somehow behind it, then God is complicit in stealing these flocks from Laban.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But we don't get any of that. We don't get any
Mm-mm.
of that. It's just a completely separate, different kind of writing. I just don't. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
and
that's why I was wondering what else you might have to say about that because I'm honestly just confused by this.
yeah. The only other thing I've got is in verse 43. It says, "In this way, the man grew exceedingly prosperous and came to own large flocks, female and male servants, and camels and donkeys."
Hmm.
How does having all these extra sheep and goats that are spotted increase the number of slaves that he has and the camels and the donkeys?
Oh, they're all spotted and striped slaves. He did the same thing with the
Okay.
people.
Yeah,
No,
I guess.
I don't know. I mean,
Like I
yeah,
said, there's a lot of this that just doesn't make sense, and I don't know if we lost stuff or if this was added
yeah,
or how it was changed or what. But what's the point?
yeah.
God could have he could have just said God blessed him and increased his flocks,
Hmm. Yeah.
instead of engaging in this deception with the magic.
Just yeah, and that's what throws me here.
Mhm.
I'm fine with it if you want to tell me that it's all happened because of God, but now we're getting this. He became prosperous. He grew
Mhm.
his slaves, donkeys, camels. All these things grew in number, and he became prosperous. Neat. Why? Because God did it. Okay, great, fine. That moving on. But no, it's because he did this weird pagan thing of like making you drink in
Yeah.
front of stripped branches.
Well, and
Okay.
Jacob knows that this is wrong as well. He knows it's
Mm-hmm.
deception and theft because right at the
Yep.
beginning of chapter 31, he's
Hmm.
gonna hightail it. He runs off in the night, I believe.
Maybe that's why God's not included here, is because God would want no part of this deception.
Well,
Jacob,
again, spoiler alert, God is active in deception in the future, but
yeah, I know, but maybe that's what's happening here. I don't know. God's
maybe.
like, he's like, man, he's like, you've already twisted my arm enough on this, Jacob. You're on your own. Do what you got to do.
Hmm.
Sure, set up some lattice work of stripped branches and it's going to give you striped donkeys. I don't know. Like, and so he's like, fill your boots, do what you want to do.
Hmm.
I don't know. So, okay, so we'll that's where we're going to leave Genesis 30 because Jacob's going to get the better of Laban, or we're setting up Jacob getting the better of Laban, and now, like you said, Jacob's going to get the heck out of there.
Hmm.
And so now Jacob overhears Laban's sons. We're in Genesis 31 now. Jacob overhears Laban's sons talking about how prosperous Jacob has grown at
Hmm.
his like on his father's dime, basically. He's like, they've gained all this wealth from what belonged to our father, not from our father, but
Hmm.
basically the investment that our father made, he's reaping the benefits for. And he noticed that Jacob realized that Laban wasn't treating him the same way that he used to, lying to him, forcing him to work, kind of deceiving him, saying, sure, dude, go ahead.
Yeah.
Suddenly he's not as nice as he used to be.
Hmm.
And so the Lord says to Jacob, speaking to him again, like, go back to where you came from, and I'll be with you. The famine's over, I guess, right?
Yeah. I mean, did Jacob have a vision? Did he go out and seek out the Lord? Did God walk up to him? How did this happen? It just says the Lord said to him,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah, yep, yeah. That's who knows? Who knows how that happens?
Hmm.
He's like, so he goes out, talks to his wives. He's like, your dad ain't the guy that I thought he was. He's actually mean. I thought he was just deceptive, but he's also mean. We need to get out of here. And God said he's going to be with us, so let's get out of here.
And he
But
cheated him by changing his wages 10 times. Where did that
yeah,
come from?
yeah,
And,
that's true. That's true. Yeah, we didn't get any of that. Okay, and let's see. God is taking away your father's livestock, give them to me. Yes, we know. We recognize that at the end of 30. Let's see. Okay, so here's 31:10. In breeding season, I once had a dream in which I looked up and saw the male goats mating with the flock, and mating with the flock were streaked, speckled, and spotted. So now we're getting an explanation for what happened before.
yep, I
But
missed that.
it's in a totally separate chapter. Like, why are we doing this?
Well, okay, so I don't think the chapters. I think the chapters is more of a modern thing. I mean, I
Okay.
say modern in terms of it's just severely removed from the original. So I don't think
Yeah.
that the fact that it's a new chapter has anything to do with it. It could have just been the next line, and they put a 30 at the top, 31 at the top.
That's definitely happened. I think like the original Hebrew text, the Torah didn't have verse delineations. It was just
Right.
a wall of
Hmm.
Hebrew. But still, we've already witnessed what we can only assume is like the intentional extracting and replacing of like the copy and pasting of other text to make it make more sense or whatever to explain certain things. And yet here we have this, we don't get the vision that Jacob has or the interaction that Jacob has with God until much later, not until he's
Hmm.
explaining it to Rachel and Leah. Like, hey, here's what we got to get out of here. And here's what happened. Why wouldn't we want to know that? Why are we waiting for the exposition on Jacob's part? You know what I mean?
But I thought that God was the one behind it, and now you know, obviously, it comes to pass that that is the case. So it goes back to that thing. God was complicit in this deception.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's true. So then the angel of God said to me in a dream, Jacob, and of course he says, Hanani, here I am. And he said, look up and see all the male goats mating with the flock are streaked and speckled or spotted. For I have seen that all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar. See, there we go. We if he hadn't done that before, we wouldn't have known about this now. And that's where you made a vow to me. So leave this land at once and go back to your native land. And so for Rachel and Leah, this must be included at some point because, okay, never mind. I was going to say the Bible, the Genesis so far has had no problem repeating things, even
Yeah.
long verses, right? But we get this now, presumably, so that we get the exposition. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we got to go. Here's why, and you, Rachel and Leah, need to know this so that you will have no problem just getting on your stuff and getting the heck out of here. But Rachel and Leah, they're not so sure about this because they're not sure if they're still going to inherit anything from Laban.
No, they're
And
not. They're not unsure. It's very clear. They're saying, "Do we have a share in the inheritance?"
Mhm.
Rhetorically, no. They're
Okay,
his property now. Does he not regard us as foreigners? Yeah, you're now married to this other person who is not from here. You're also a foreigner with him. And then it says, "Surely all the wealth that God took away from our father belongs to us and our children. So do whatever God." They're fine with it. Do whatever God said for you to do. We're gonna go.
okay. Well then, okay, that's fine. Let's say that that's the case. How do we square then Rachel going in and stealing the idols from her father's tent, her household gods, his household gods?
Yeah, I mean, it does specifically say that she mentions God. Whoever it's talking, whichever one of the wives is talking, mentions God and do whatever God has told you. Um, so it's clear that she's acknowledging this God or whatever. But if she's coming from this henotheistic background, she might be taking the gods because she's pissed at her father for treating her husband that way, or because this is her heritage,
Mhm.
and she's not entirely sure she's ready to give up
Exactly.
these gods.
Exactly. That's why it makes me think that, and that's kind of where I lean. And I'm wondering if that's part of what makes them so curious. They're like, so wait, we're just supposed to leave? Like, what happens now? Like, what we're just supposed to go be with you and be, attend to the wants and wills of your God? Like, and that's what made me say that they might be a little unsure. And that's why Rachel goes and steals the idols.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like they would have known their property. You know, again, this is going back to I like the birthright thing. I think this is part of the culture that they would have known. I could be wrong about that, but I'm also not entirely well versed on how that would have worked back in the day, even if they were the property. So I don't know.
Yeah, no problem. So Jacob leaves, Jacob flees, and it wasn't until the third day that Laban is made aware of that. But that's
Yeah,
not before. That's not before the Bible specifically mentions that Jacob deceives him once more by just taking off.
yeah.
Which I don't know how that works, because we figure out that he's labored not just for the first 7 years, not just for the second, but for 6 more years. He's been with them for 20 years. So where's the deception? Like, I guess the expectation was, he's like, all right, man, appreciate it. I actually have all these goats. They're all kind of spotted, but whatever. We had that arrangement. Are taking your daughters. I'm hightailing it. Was that the expectation?
I don't know. It sounds like he ran off in the night and didn't tell him. Like maybe Laban was still expecting him to be working for him. He said, "Name your
Mm,
wages," and he's taking his wages, so he's paying him.
mm,
These spotted and streak slaves and whatnot, so he's getting paid. He's paying him. He's expecting him to show up to work.
hmm Yeah.
That's the way I
Okay.
took it.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, he didn't put in his 2 weeks. He just took off.
Right.
So that's pretty deceptive. All right. So on the third day, Laban lets out after Jacob and follows him for 7 days, catches up with him in Gilead, which is interesting. I wonder how he knew where he went. I guess they followed the camel droppings.
I mean, if he's got all these large flocks and stuff, there's got to be some way to follow.
Oh yeah, probably so. So God visits Laban in a dream and says, "Don't say anything to
Don't
Jacob."
say anything to him.
Yeah, what do you make of that? What does that mean? Don't say anything good or bad. Is that because, like, he holds the future of my people in his, like, in his
I don't
lineage?
know. And then the very next passage in verse 25, or sorry, in 26, he talks to him. So I don't get the point of it.
Yeah, yeah. Don't say anything to him, good or bad. What have you done? You deceived me. You've carried off my daughters like captives in a war. I'm
Mhm.
sorry. What? What do you mean? Like, it's one thing that I left. And again, in the previous in 21, it said that, no, I'm sorry, not in 21. In 20, it says that Jacob deceived Laban once more by not telling him he was running away. But that's not what
Just
made Laban mad. He's mad that he took his daughters. Insofar as that's
that's
the thing he specifically mentions.
that's what he mentions. I think he's upset that he's taking this income, this blessing, because he's being blessed through Jacob by God. And I think that's the thing. He's got this history of deceiving him in order to get more out of him. And so
Mhm.
I think that's the main thing. And he's just using an excuse. You took my daughters. I didn't get to say goodbye. I didn't get to send you away with joy and songs. I didn't even get to kiss my grandchildren goodbye.
Right, right, right.
I think it's just an excuse.
Okay. And then he accuses him of having done a foolish thing. He's like, I have the power to harm you. But last
Yeah.
night, but last night, God, your father, the God of your father said, don't do anything to Jacob, either good or bad. He has to tell him that, specifically what he said, like literally what he said. And now you leave to return to your father's household, but why did you steal my goods? Right?
The
And
gods.
yeah, so why
Stole
did
the
you steal my
gods.
gods? Yeah, why'd you
Yeah.
steal my idols? And Jacob is confused. And like, he's not only confused, he's like taken aback. He's like, how dare you?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, he
He's
has
like,
no idea.
yeah, that's true.
Jacob.
And he's so affronted by this accusation. He's like, search my things, find the person that took them, and I will put them to death.
Yeah.
Doesn't he condemn them to Laban?
Yeah. He says that.
Yeah. So Laban turns out all of Jacob's pockets, and except for Rachel's, she can't get off her camel.
Yeah, because she's on her period. She's unclean. She can't
Yeah.
have any contact with any person,
Mhm.
other than women, I assume, but they would become unclean as well.
Yeah,
So,
that's interesting.
if she's sitting on the idols, does that make the gods unclean as well? I don't know.
I don't know. I wonder if she really worships them in the same way that her father did. If that's something that you can do.
Yeah.
But
And I also love that Jacob's incensed at the accusation. You dare, accuse me of stealing
yeah,
after I've stolen from
Yeah.
you.
After all the things I've stolen from you, you say that I'm stealing.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and now that I'm thinking about it, not to get off of that, that's pretty good. Rachel probably wasn't on her period, right?
No.
Yeah. So
Well,
yeah, there you go. Yeah, makes sense. So anyway, so now Jacob, now that he's been vindicated, he's like, okay, what's my crime? He's like kind of rubbing it in. He's like, why have you done this? Why have you embarrassed me in front of all these people and yourself in front of your people? Tell me what exactly you're getting at. And you've followed me, you've hunted me down. What's the deal? He said, I've been with you for 20 years. Anytime your flock, a member of your flock was lost, I bore the cost of that. I've done everything that you've asked me to do. And Laban stands firm. He's like, these women are my daughters. These children are my children, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Everything you see is mine. Yet, what can I do about these daughters of mine or the children they have born? Let's make a covenant, you and I, and let it serve as a witness between us. Is he okay with it? Is he saying, what's he saying? Like, let bygones be bygones, agree to disagree? Or is he
I think
admitting
that's what he's doing.
Okay, so he's not admitting to Jacob that the right thing has occurred. He's still saying, I don't like this, but
Yeah. But because God said, don't do anything good or bad to him, even though he's already accused him of stealing and stuff, don't do anything good or bad. So I'm going to honor that. And I think maybe this comes back into that stone that we mentioned before, because it says that Laban says, this heap is witness between you and me today. And there's this pillar and this heap. And I'm thinking maybe that pillar is the one with the stone that was anointed.
okay.
They've named it something else again. It's now Gilead, and Mitzpah, again named because of the thing that happened there or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that I found interesting is that they swear an oath to not cross those heap and pillar to come to the other side and harm each other. And Jacob swears on the God of Abraham or whatever. Let's see, how does he put it?
God of Nahor.
Yeah. So Jacob took an oath in the name of the fear of his father Isaac. He just swore to the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, presumably the same person, on the fear of his father, who's dead now at this point. I don't understand that.
So I think what we're getting at with the word fear there is we're saying that we're talking about God fearing. And I think what we're getting when we say that the fear of his father Isaac, he's saying he's attesting that his faith, that the belief he has in the faith of his father and the God of Abraham and Abraham's dad and everyone before me. He's like, I'm swearing on my entire lineage and and the strength they had in their conviction to God that I am not going to cross this line. I think that's what they're getting. I think that's what the word fear is meant to convey there.
Okay. I can see that.
Yeah.
And so the next morning, Laban goes to leave. He kissed his grandchildren and his daughters, and he blessed them. So he's got enough blessings for more than one kid, for one thing. But also, if Rachel was on her period and can't get up and can't be touched and all this stuff, it says he kissed his daughters. So I don't know.
I don't know. That's interesting. I don't know. So it says the next morning. It's not
significant, but it is interesting. It's definitely the next morning. So it either is just coincidence that her 7 days of being unclean or whatever the rituals was, ended. Well, no, it couldn't have been, because the way they take days is an evening and a morning, and doesn't start in the morning. You know what I mean? So the next morning would have been the same day.
1 second. Will you make that point again so I can get your dogs up from behind you?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So it's the next morning. So if this logic that I'm following here, if Rachel was on her period and couldn't be touched or whatever, and then the next morning he goes to kiss her, her time had to have ended, her time of being unclean, which if I remember correctly is like 7 days after your period is over or something, is when you're finally clean again. It had to have ended there, except that because the way they do things, the days are the evening and the morning, not the morning and the evening. So the next morning would have been the same day. So it couldn't have ended at that point unless there's some time in between, the searching for the gods. But it says the next morning. So,
you're right. I think I might be willing to let that slide because they've already made the oath. They've already made the oath, and a condition of that oath wasn't that Jacob hadn't deceived them. Laban at that point was already like, look, you got the better of me. I think it's good that we established that a second ago. Laban's like, I'm willing to just let this go. We're gonna draw this imaginary line. Don't cross this pillar. and you'll stay over there, I'll stay over here. Let's have a meal. And so at that point, they can be like, Rachel can be like, I'm having this. And Laban's like, oh, geez, like, whatever. I've already said what I had to say. I'm willing to let this go.
Yeah, I mean, I guess could have, but I don't think if that had happened that he would have been like, "Oh, I made this oath."
Yeah.
I think at that point the oath would have been null and void because of the deception, the obvious deception. Ah, heaven,
I think, but we're probably attributing actual human attributes to
Yeah.
what's clearly meant to be like a myth. I don't know. You know what I mean? So.
Mhm.
All right. Well, I think that's a good spot to leave off today. It's kind of anticlimactic, but I definitely wanted to get through. I wanted to get Jacob. I want to get to the point where Jacob is he's free. He's able to like
Mhm.
take his kids. He's had 11 children so far, and Joseph has Joseph has been born. So I think that'd be a good place to leave off and give us some promise for the next episode. Is there anything else you wanted to mention before we move on?
You might want to cut this out, but I just did notice that I think this is the Laban episode here is the first blessing that female children have received up to this point.
You
I don't
mean
know
like
if that's significant or not, but
do you mean by receiving a mention? How did what blessing? Like Laban bestows blessings on his children?
that's what it says. It says Laban had, let me see if I can read it specifically. Early next morning, Laban kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's first that I've noticed of a woman that's actually received a blessing.
Okay. And
I don't know if
the
it's
woman being his
significant.
daughters or being Dinah, the grandchild?
His daughters.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, so I have no qualms with that.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's because he has no sons. That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, that is interesting. Well, I'll have to make note of that. But yeah, I guess anything else that you wanted to go over?
No, I think that was it.
Okay.
I think we covered everything.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. We're going to leave it off there at Genesis 31. Pick up on Genesis 32 with the next episode. And until then, this has been Eating the Apple. I'm Jeff.
I'm Chris.
And we'll see you next time.